Welcome to the For Love and Money podcast, the show where business and social purpose meet to inspire a movement for positive change. Here's your host, Carolyn Butler-Madden.
Hello and welcome to the For Love and Money podcast. Today's conversation sits right at the intersection of business, activism, identity, and what it really means to lead with values when it would be easier not to. For our first episode of 2026, I'm joined by Sarah Sheridan. Sarah is co-founder and deputy CEO of Clothing the Gaps. They're a certified Aboriginal business, a social enterprise, and a B Corp that uses fashion as a vehicle for truth-telling, education, and First Nations justice. Sarah grew up on a farm in north-central Victoria on Butler-Madden country. She describes herself as someone who once thought she might fix the world before being humbled by what it really means to listen, to unlearn, and to show up differently. That journey from good intentions to deep accountability is central to this conversation. In this episode, we talk candidly about what it takes to build a purpose-led business that is both values-driven and commercially sustainable. Sarah shares the reality of rapid growth, hard decisions, and reshaping a business so it can endure, not just survive a moment. We also explore one of the most important and possibly uncomfortable conversations facing Australia. Why January 26th is not a date to celebrate, and what it might look like if we had the courage to imagine something better. Sarah speaks powerfully about the Not a Date to Celebrate campaign, the role business can play in social change, and how allyship begins not with perfection, but with responsibility. This is a conversation about love in business, not as a soft idea, but as something robust, demanding, and deeply human. I hope you listen with curiosity, sit with any discomfort that arises, and consider the role you might play as a leader, a consumer, and a citizen in shaping the future we say we want. Here's my conversation with Sarah Sheridan from Clothing the Gaps. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us on the For Love and Money podcast. Welcome.
Hi, Kaylin. Thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to be joining you from very sunny Butler-Madden country down here in regional Victoria today.
I'm so glad you could make it, and this is a conversation I'm really looking forward to having with you. But we'll kick off with the signature question. What are your thoughts? Do you believe there's a role for love in business and perhaps, given where you're coming from, in activism?
Oh, absolutely, Carolyn. And I love that this is your signature question because I think, especially in today's world, business has to be about so much more than just profit and doing a thing. I think one of the biggest things that drew Laura Thompson, my co-founder, who's a good Inspired woman, and I into business was the opportunity to do things differently. And I think for us, love really holds a very important place in that, in the way that we centre Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and campaigns and causes. We always say that mob's at the heart of everything that we do. And I think leading with love in that is so important. And it just helps make businesses tough as well. And so is activism, and so is advocacy. And I think when you can centre love in that and not just give it a side role when it becomes the main actor in all of those things, it actually just makes it so much nicer.
Thank you so much for that. And yeah, I think what I love about it is it centers our purpose in emotion,
Yeah, absolutely.
And clearly Clothing the Gaps is centered in that very, very strong emotion of love for mob.
And purpose, I think, in that too, in that, as I said, that business is tough, and especially, we're a retail brand at the end of the day, and retail in Melbourne especially is really tough at the moment. And so shout out to all of the retail crew that are listening. I feel you. It's tough. And I think if you don't have a bigger purpose that helps you grind through the challenges, as well as, making the most of every opportunity, of course. But I think if there's not something bigger than that in it, it's a hard slog. But yeah, no, love and our purpose really, really drives us and guides us every day, which is, one of the best things about business for us. The fashion is a vehicle for everything that we do, and is to help us achieve and work towards our purpose of uniting Indigenous and non-Indigenous people through fashion and a cause.
I love that. I love that. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Now, let's talk about you. I want to get some background on you. So you are co-founder of Clothing the Gaps along with Laura Thompson. But you've worked at the intersection of fashion, social change, and First Nations advocacy for years. What are the key moments that shaped your path to Clothing the Gaps today?
It's a really, really, really good question, actually, Karen, because I can guarantee you that if you ran into any of the crew that I went to high school with and they said, what's Sarah doing now? I don't think any of them ever thought that the answer would be, oh, she's running a streetwear label in Melbourne.
Really? Oh,
Oh,
wow.
gosh, no. I've always loved clothes, don't get me wrong. And it's funny, I think one of the first things that Laura and I first bonded over when Laura was actually my boss at the Victorian Aboriginal Health Service. We've been working together this is 11 years that we've been working together for now, actually.
That's incredible.
I know, in lots of different capacities, but 11 years, working alongside each other. And I think op shopping was one of the first things that Laws and I actually really bonded over when she was my boss there. So I guess the road to Clothing the Gaps is really interesting, both for Laws and I, but I'll speak from my perspective. As a non-Indigenous person who grew up in a tiny little country town about an hour away from where I am now, so it's hilarious that I'm back living on Wotjobaluk country, is where I grew up. Horsham, the Aboriginal medical service in Horsham is called Gulum Gulum. And I actually did an internship at Gulum Gulum when I was in my last year of my first year of uni, last semester of my first year of uni, sorry. And I really probably thought 18-year-old Sarah, who'd just finished, 1 year of living in Melbourne and all of these things, probably thought that by her mid-30s she'd be running the UN or a diplomat somewhere. Like I was just like that classic white girl who, got around all of the charity things at school. And I probably just thought that I knew how to fix everything. I was just going to go and change the world and everything was going to be fine.
Idealism of youth.
Oh, absolutely. And just what I know now, understanding and reflecting on that, like just the absolute white savior mentality as well, that was really rooted in. Anyway, and I got to Gulum Gulum and I realised that I knew nothing and that I had a lot to learn. And It was very humbling. And I am still, to this day, so incredibly grateful. And I'm still, friends with a lot of the crew that I worked with there. And it's lovely to be back in Horsham, getting to connect and do work together again in this phase of my life as well, which has been really nice. But yeah, so when I came back from Horsham, I realised that I had a lot of work to do of unlearning and relearning, which was, incredible as well, of having that blindfold, I guess, taken off and being like, yeah, the world's a little bit different to what 17-year-old Sarah thought it was. And I'm really grateful that I got to work alongside quite a few different Aboriginal-led initiatives over those next couple of years. And then everybody just kept telling me, they were like, you need to meet Laura. You need to meet Laura. And everybody kept telling me that. And it's funny, Caroline, I still have my diary from my first year of uni where I've got like coffee with Laura scheduled across about a 2-week period. And she kept bumping me from like one day to the next as I was trying to get I had to finish my very last subject. It was a placement subject. I was studying health science and international development at La Trobe, and I had to do a formal placement to graduate essentially. And Laura finally had a coffee with me and we got along really well. We had complementary skill sets and, we both ended up just working really, really well together. I ended up getting a job at the health service after that. And then, Laws and I left there about 3.5 years after. We worked together for about 3.5 years. Led some incredible programs and we got to take on lots of different things. But I guess that cycle of government funding just got a bit challenging for us as two people who wanted to continue to push boundaries, try new things. Waiting for permission to get to do that was just probably not really ideal for us, as you can probably see from the way that we run Clothing the Gaps. So, and then our first business was actually a health promotion consultancy called Spark Health.
Yep.
And when we launched Spark Health, we had a really small offering of merchandise, because at the health service, we'd always done merch. Like anybody who's been around Aboriginal community control, Aboriginal health and wellbeing programs or initiatives or health promotion in any capacity know that mob merch, community merch is a really big deal. It's everywhere and it's the best incentive piece ever. So we knew that merch was really important to us, and we had like 3 little pieces. We had like a reusable coffee cup, a training singlet and a hoodie. And we launched as Spark merch because it was Spark Health, so the merch was Spark merch. Terrible. That eventually sort of grew and grew and grew a bit. And then it ended up having a bit more of a streetwear flavour. And then it was getting really complicated to explain that Spark merch supported the Spark Health programs. And then the name Clothing the Gap came out. And then I guess really what happened was lockdown and Black Lives Matter taking off in the UK, again in the UK, like a resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement in the States with the murder of George Floyd.
Yeah.
And people in Australia really considered what that meant for at home as well, of understanding that injustice here between non-Indigenous population group and First Nations people was really, really inequitable as well, and that this wasn't a story that was just affecting somewhere else. This was a story that happened at home too. So the support for Aboriginal brands in that time was incredible, was amazing. At that time, we were also running the Free the Flag campaign because we had had a cease and desist on using the Aboriginal flag.
I remember that.
Yeah. So it was just kind of like this perfect storm. And what we were able to do was use that moment to educate a lot of people. So we spent a lot of time writing educational content and blogs and resources. We wrote a blog in that time called Allyship Beyond the Trend as well. If we had a lot of people buying either Always Was, Always Will Be tees or Free the Flag tees from us to wear to Black Lives Matter rallies, which is great. Wearing the values on your tee is really important, but what you do, the days before and the days after is critical in that. Otherwise, it's just performative. And so we spent a lot of time talking about that as well. So yeah, COVID was a really, really big growth time for us. It was pretty hectic. We opened our first store as well in between lockdowns. And so we moved on to
What year was that?
shop. Oh, it must have been 2020, late 2020.
Yeah, right. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right
So
in between the lockdowns. That's brave.
Yeah, it was crazy. I think we thought that it was finishing a whole like lockdown was finishing a whole lot more earlier than perhaps what it did. But at the same time too, that we were picking and packing all of our own orders.
Yeah, right.
So we're running a distribution centre behind the shop. I think if it had just been a pure retail space, we wouldn't have perhaps done it. But we were fulfilling orders up these like crickety set of stairs in Preston on High Street above Rent-A-Bomb, which is a very cheap car rental. There was nothing glamorous about our first office scale, and it was very pokey and small and dark and dingy, and we really needed to move. So,
and how many of you at this point? Was it just you and Laura?
There was Laura and I. There was Sienna Couture, who was our brand and marketing person, who was really influential in the start of sort of changing the shape of what Clothing the Gap's the brand looked and felt like. So Sen's a gem. And then Lena Charles was leading the foundation work with us as well. And we had a couple of other sort of like part-time casual people helping us pick and pack orders, lots of legendary, volunteers, all those sorts of things. But, lots of my friends and Laws's family and friends that kind of got dragged up the stairs after hours to help us handwrite AusPost labels.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and then we actually grew really, really quickly. And I guess one of the things that has been probably the biggest challenge for us, Carolyn, is finding the right size and the right operating system as a business for us to do what we do in the most impactful and sustainable way possible. It's really funny, Carolyn, when we were chatting about this podcast post-assembly, post the B Corp catch-up, You're like, I have asked you to be on the podcast, actually. And I was like, I remember this now, Carolyn. And I remember reading your gorgeous invitation to come on the podcast and being like, I can't talk about money. We are so far from knowing what works for us. I remember this now. And it was really interesting. Like we had, at one point in time, we had 43 staff. We had the shop. We had 2 warehouses. We had dead stock coming out our ears because those COVID years, and then the wait times on imported goods was just a really challenging time as a very new business with, the hundreds of % growth quarter on quarter that we were seeing it was really challenging to scaffold quick enough and in the right way and in the right spot. And what we found post-COVID when, everybody sort of, that growth in online retail really flattened out and we saw the true size and shape of what Closing the Gaps, what the demand actually really was in the real life, it was very different to what we'd scaffolded for.
Wow.
And Laura and I have probably spent the best part of 2 years, to be honest, remolding, reshaping and rethinking and reworking the whole business and our team and the way that we do what we do to find the right shape. So today there's myself and Laura, our fabulous retail manager, a bunch of legendary retail assistant casuals and marketing coordinator who does as many hours a week as she can fit in between studying to be a teacher, and she happens to be with Laura's daughter as well.
All right.
So
beautiful.
we've got a lot of flexibility about the hours that we use Rosie in there. So that's our team. Like that's it. We have some outsourced crew that help us get things from Laura's brain into a tech pack to get into manufacturing. And we now outsource our warehousing and distribution because that was one of the biggest pinch point for us in that from an operating perspective, whether we got 10 orders a day or 1,010 orders a day, it cost us the exact same amount of money.
And do you know what? Congratulations on surviving. A lot of businesses fell through the cracks a lot during that time. And it was a really difficult time. And it's still challenging, right? But also, I think, the idea that bigger is better. I mean, I learned that from when I ran my agency. When we were at our largest size, we were at our most unprofitable,
Yes.
And it's like, at what point can you create that impact and be profitable just be sustainable as a business. And so, congratulations on really thinking about that and doing the work behind it, because I think that's vital to, having a sustainable business.
Yeah, it was really tough, to be honest, Carolyn. We had to wrap up quite a few people that we loved working with who were incredibly exceptional at what they did as well. Like it certainly wasn't easy, but we really knew that if we didn't make some big and tough decisions, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you today. So I'd be back in the same boat, Carolyn, of being like, I can't go on that podcast. I don't know how to run the business.
I'm so glad you have come on the podcast. And it's hard, right? That philosophy of hire slowly, fire quickly is really hard in a purpose-driven business.
It is. And I think what people will often say to us have been like, what advice could you give, early, like 2019, Laura and Sarah? And I would just say, just work out what it is that you are going to do. You don't have to be everything to everybody. You don't have to do everything. And I think because and it happens to purpose-led businesses so often, is because you are so passionate about the cause that you have started the business for. And we're a social enterprise. We're also a B Corp and a certified Aboriginal business. Like, because we are purpose-driven. So, and you see it in so many social enterprises, is that the impact side of things gets all the resources, all the attention, all of the brain space, which is brilliant, except if we're not also working out how to run it as a sustainable and viable enterprise, we won't be here to give the impact bit the love that we want to give it. So we really had to take a few steps back and go, okay, first of all, we need to clear the overdraft. And then we can continue to be here for a really long time, to continue to educate, advocate, and elevate other people's voices for social change for First Nations people in this country. Because, if we hadn't, honestly, Carolyn, we wouldn't still be operating.
Oh, I believe it. I believe it. Well said.
Yeah.
And it's. I think that some people harbour this idea that purpose is a magic pill, and it's not. You have to have all those elements of business, quality, pricing, the right people, all of that. And you clearly started clothing the gaps as a purpose-driven enterprise, but it doesn't mean that you don't have to do all the work that comes with, the traditional work of a business.
Absolutely. If anything, you actually have to do it better, because it's fascinating. And I appreciate that they do, but people hold us to an incredibly high standard that they probably don't put on other retailers. I don't think I've ever seen anybody walk into Sportsgirl and question them about, well, what do you do with your profit? And why are all of these things made in China? Like, well, actually, there's nowhere else that we can get our pins made. We've tried to get them made in Australia, and we can't. And the local manufacturing sector is incredibly challenged at the moment, and we work really closely with lots of different peak bodies on feeding back our experience in that. We're really committed to the locally made sector. We're really proud to still have a locally made collection, but it's getting harder and harder, not just from a cost perspective, but from actually like other manufacturers still existing in the country. Like it's tough out there.
Yeah.
So I just think, so not only do you need to have all of those other facets of your business running really well, you actually have to have them running incredibly well, because people will want to know. I'm really excited about, we've got a traceability project that we're launching in 2026 as well, where, obviously Laura and I know exactly where everything's made and we've vetted all of those things, but to be able to put that on the website in a way that's really tangible and accessible for our supporters as well is really exciting. There's so much work that happens behind the scenes.
I bet there is.
Yeah. And then at the moment, part of that really big key focus for us is the Not a Date to Celebrate campaign. And it's really funny. We often get retailers being like, we're actually just really busy with like Black Friday right now. Like, can we come back to you? I'm like, what do you think we're doing as well? Like, today is the 28th of November. It's Black Friday. We don't get the luxury of saying, actually, we're not going to care about our impact for a few weeks.
Yeah.
We're just gonna do business. That's, when you run your business with purpose at the heart of everything that you do, it gets to get weaved into that work as well, which is also such an incredible opportunity. Like, I'm really excited that in every single one of our Black Friday orders, so all of our orders that have gone out in all of November and into Christmas, everybody will have received a campaign letter from Laura and I.
Yeah.
It's a really beautiful envelope. It says on the front of it says a message about a day that divides us. There's a letter in there from Laura and I explaining updates about the Not a Date to Celebrate campaign. And there's a really beautiful Not a Date to Celebrate magnet for people's fridges as well. So for us,
oh wow,
it's about being like, well, how do we use the key sales period to campaign? Not how do we pause campaigning so that we can do a key sales period. I think that's the difference.
Before we dive back in, a quick word from me. If you're enjoying this conversation, you might want to know that I work with leaders and organisations on how purpose becomes a powerful driver of trust, performance and resilience. I speak at leadership conferences and company events about how purpose shows up where it matters most, in leadership, in culture and in strategy, helping organisations grow with clarity and confidence in a changing world. You can find out more at my website, carolynbutler-madden.com. Now, back to the episode. So let's talk about it. Not a date to celebrate. Obviously, we're referring to January 26th, Australia Day. And that's a date which marks the 1788 arrival of the first fleet of British ships in Sydney Cove and the beginning of British colonisation. And understandably, it is a deeply painful day for First
Yeah,
Nations people.
it is, Carolyn. And I think, for me as a non-Aboriginal person, like I'll speak from my perspective, like I just don't understand why as a country we have chosen a day that for First Nations people reflects and is such a reminder and a symbol of colonization, of dispossession, of genocide, of loss of language, of loss of life. Why we have chosen that day to be our day of national celebration. We are the only country in the world that still celebrates its national day on the day of its colonization. Like it's just, it genuinely perplexes me. I just think you don't have to have too much empathy to
No.
think, well, as a non-Aboriginal person, like this actually doesn't really affect me all that much. And if it affects somebody else enormously, like why can't we just make some changes here? And we have to remember too that Australia Day has only been celebrated on the 26th of January since 1994. So I always find it fascinating when people are like, well, it's the way that it's
Yes.
always been done. I'm like, no, it's not.
So, yeah, I forgot the date.
I'm older.
1994.
Yeah, I'm older than January 26th as being Australia Day.
And so when you ask that question, why did we pick a date? I mean, the obvious answer is ignorance, but 1994 is too close for us to use ignorance as an excuse.
Exactly, Carolyn. And I think especially when we think about what this date has meant to First Nations people for so long, William Cooper declared January 26 as a day of mourning in 1938. He wrote a letter and there's a sermon that he spoke on the 23rd of January 1938 where he declared the 26th of January as a day of mourning and he asked others to recognise with him. And I just think I'm going to do some quick maths and it's probably terrible. It's around 87 years ago.
Yeah.
Like for 87 years, we have known Aboriginal advocates and activists have stood up and asked others to stand with them. And we're still having this same conversation. So I think there's lots of different thoughts around Jan 26, both from the non-Indigenous perspective and First Nations people have got a wide range of views about this as well, obviously, because it's, like all community groups, no one has the exact same thinking about any issue. But one thing that is super clear is that January 26 is not a date to celebrate.
No. It's a day of mourning. It's also a date of British colonisation. This country is a multicultural country. It doesn't represent that, but more importantly, it doesn't represent. I just find it mind-blowing that we have the oldest living civilization in the world, and for me it's like, wow, we should have such pride about that, and we should be celebrating that and fiercely protecting,
I couldn't agree more, Carolyn. Yeah, and I just think my world is so much bigger, broader, richer and deeper because of the understanding and connection and just the grace that Aboriginal people have shown people who are interested in learning about culture and community. I think it's such a gift and we should be so much more prouder of it than what we are. And I couldn't agree more. In 2025 or 2026, the narrative about what being an Australian is needs a bit of a refresh and a rethink, I think, in that, I'm fifth generation, Irish settler. I have full understanding of what the impacts of that look like from my family's perspective of, being part of that early settlement. And I think the more that we can understand and reflect on our own stories as individual, where we've come from, why, I think if we can all understand actually that, I have a story outside of this country too that I should be reflecting on. And I think if we can all reflect on that for ourselves, I think we might understand a little bit more about the importance of legacy and the importance of history and the importance of generations that have come before us, rather than the get over it narrative that isn't helpful at all.
And we have such a rich and diverse culture,
Mm,
and it's begging to be celebrated more than it is. I think one of the most important things when I think about it is, there are people, there are organizations who are doing their utmost to divide and conquer. Right? Justify people feeling resentment to another group. And yet there's such an opportunity to think about, as you say, who we are as Australians, what unites us. What is that thing? We come from all these different backgrounds, but what is something that what are things that unite us? What is the narrative that unites us? What can we feel proud about? What can we try and achieve together? What does the best of us look like as a united force?
Absolutely. And I think we're at a very interesting time in social cohesion, not just in Australia, around the world. And I think when I look about what's happening in other places around the world who traditionally are a few years ahead of us, and we see the impacts of, we often see trends and coming a few years later, I think I don't want that here. I want us as a nation to actually choose to love and accept and celebrate our differences together, and that being differently stronger when we're different, actually, and that there's so much that we can learn and celebrate about each other. It's just that date isn't on the 26th of January, and that's okay. Like, I think I've always find it so interesting of when people get afraid of updating their thinking based on new information. And like, actually, that's what makes us intelligent human beings, is that when we don't continue to do the same thing, we have new information, we have new perspectives that perhaps, for different reasons, they weren't spoken about in our homes or in our schools, but we have access to those perspectives now. It's time we updated our thinking, and that just makes us smart humans, Carol.
Absolutely. And so when we don't, what does that make us? I shouldn't ask that question.
We can let your listeners fill in that gap. But I just think this is an opportunity. It's not something to be scared of. There's so much to celebrate about this country. There's so much to be so proud and so grateful of. There really is. There are, of course, things that we could do better, but so can everybody. And I just think we just have to really think about what it looks like when we think about Jan 26 as not a date to celebrate, and what the alternatives might be. And, we're really excited about seeing other businesses who, see love in that journey for them as well. We have over 160 businesses, not-for-profits, Aboriginal businesses, Aboriginal organisations that have joined the Not a Date to Celebrate campaign.
How many?
So over 160.
That's amazing.
I know, it really is. And there's some incredible brands that have jumped on board.
Can you give a shout out to some of them?
I can. We've got fabulous people like Elk, Kip & Co, Nagnata, Lush. We're going to be in the windows of Lush for majority of January. You can pop into a Lush store from about the 19th of Jan onwards and pick up Not a Date to Celebrate merch and support the campaign. You can sign the petition in store. There's all sorts of fabulous things that are happening. So seeing other retailers, seeing other brands and businesses lend their platform to the Not a Date to Celebrate campaign has been amazing. And there's still room for more businesses. We've got a section on our website. So if you go to the impact section on our website, and then there's the Not a Date to Celebrate campaign, there's a whole gamut of ways that you can get involved. We completely understand that for some businesses, they're ready and able to jump all in, be like, put our logo on, let us sign the petition. We'll share your posts on our social media on the day. We'll send it out to, our big mailing list. We'll encourage all of our community of supporters to support you too. And then there's some businesses that are like, we're really ready to have an internal conversation because we're learning too. And I think finding the right size fit for advocacy for your business at that moment in time is also really important. So the door's open for businesses, to jump in to find the thing that fits for where they're at the moment too. So we're really excited about this campaign at the moment, Carolyn, and I've just got such a fire in my belly about it, to be honest. This is what gets me out of bed every day at the moment. I'm just like, there's so much work to do on Not a Date to Celebrate. And we have to see this change.
And it shows through the way you talk about it. I just signed up my business, The Cause Effect, yesterday. And so it doesn't matter if you're a small organisation, medium or large, you can support. And I love that you've made that point, that there are different ways of supporting an advocacy and you find the thing that's right for you. So there are many non-Indigenous Australians who want to be better allies, but I guess they're scared about getting it wrong. So, what advice do you have for them?
Yeah, it's a really great question, Carolyn. And I think for me, having been in that same position as well, of being like, oh, this is something that I'm actually really passionate about, but I don't want to do the wrong thing or say the wrong thing, because that's also coming from a place of care and love in itself, of not wanting to cause any harm in that. And I think that is something that we should always be thinking about and holding in our thinking and in our approaches as well, of that first do no harm. But it's also really important that we don't let that be the barrier for stepping up as well. And I really encourage anybody who's thinking about what more they could be doing to start with education. There's an enormous amount of resources that have been written out there. I think it's a really natural human instinct to turn and be like, I'm going to go and ask an Aboriginal person what they want me to do. Pause. Not yet. Read everything that you can find out about it, update your own thinking, start sharing what you've been learning with other people from a curiosity and a reflection perspective of, I've been reading this podcast. Did you know? I'm reading this podcast, reading this blog, listening to this podcast. There's so many of those conversations that we can be having in our spaces that are that ripple effect of updating our information and the way that we see the world every day. And then so often we actually get this in our DMs a lot, of when people are like, I want to do more. What can I do to help? And one of the first questions that Laura and I will always ask to anybody that approaches us as an Aboriginal business, of when they want to do more, is, what's your skill set? Like, everybody has got this golden skill, this golden nugget that they are exceptional at. Like, I think a really good example is we had an engineering firm who were like, we'd love to come into your warehouse and pack orders for the day. I'm like, please don't. How about? I'm like, that sounds like really hard work for me to teach you how to do everything for one day, for you to then turn around and go home again. And then you've actually just taken a day's work of all of our Aboriginal staff that are already in put. Like, no, please don't do that. How about we introduce you to our friends in the Torres Strait who are navigating seawalls? You guys are engineers. Maybe that's like, think about using, like, if you're a lawyer, think about what your service offering the community might look like. Like, if you are, like, everybody has got that thing. If you're a teacher, what resources might you be able to create or share, or a homework club, or do you know what I mean? Like, everybody has got that thing. And that goes across all spaces as well. I think in any form of community care and resource sharing, it's not about doing something that you know nothing about, that you think is going to make you feel good about doing the thing. It's actually about, sharing your resources and what you're really great at, and sharing that special sauce with somebody else who may not be able to access it. Yeah.
Absolutely. If you're a podcaster, get Sarah.
This is a great example. Share your platform.
Yeah.
Reshare. And for other brands, like, probably one of the easiest things is, you do not need to be the expert on all of the things. All you need to do is reshare other people who are sharing information that's coming from a place of knowledge, and say, I found this really interesting. Check it out. You don't need to rewrite your own version of that and research it and do the thing. That's actually, it may not be all that helpful, because maybe you don't actually know So, yeah, I think rethinking that, how do I help?
Yes.
And thinking about what do I need to do first so that I'm coming into it ready to go and informed. And then, yeah, what's your special sauce?
Love it. What's your special sauce? Bring that. Thank you. So I want to cast to the future. If you can imagine Australia 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
we change the date. We change
Mm-hmm.
the date, okay? And
Mm-hmm.
10 years from then, what does that country, what does that nation look like to you?
Oh, I love this question, Carolyn. I really do. And I think we all need a bit of hope and optimism, especially when we live in the purpose sector. And I have been holding on to this future dreaming thinking for a while now. For me, Australia 10 years in the future is one where First Nations people, culture and communities are celebrated, supported and are equal in our society. And that as a broader community, we are proud and grateful for First Nations people, and I think there's so much hope in when I talk to younger people who are still at school, and kids who can tell me all sorts of different things. They'll come up to my t-shirt and be like, "That's Bunjil." And I've got an embroidered t-shirt of having the wedge-tailed eagle, which is a Bunjil, the creative spirit of the Kulin Nation. And I just think I am so excited about what 10 years into the future looks like when those, those 18-year-olds, when they're the ones that are entering the workforce, when they're the ones that are at uni, what they are going to demand of society as being better and good enough, I think is so, so exciting. Obviously, a really big part of that 10 years into the future bit, Carolyn, is that we all respect and understand that Jan 26 is not a date to celebrate, and we are no longer celebrating Australia Day on Jan 26. And I'm actually really excited about what a National Day of Celebration in 10 years looks like about being able to be really proud and welcoming and honest with ourselves, I think, about what the national identity of this country should actually really be. It's exciting.
I agree. And I feel like that maturity to be able to reflect on things that perhaps, are not palatable truths.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I think Australia could be an incredible nation, a beacon, an inspiration for other nations. We are never going to get there until we reconcile with the truth.
Absolutely.
Not just with that one, not one truth, several truths, right?
Absolutely. And I think there's a false narrative of what we like to project onto the international stage of what we think, of what some people think Australia should be, or this stereotype of what Australians are. And I think the lack of depth and respect in that narrative sometimes is really disappointing. And I'm really excited about what a national identity that has grown up looks like.
Yeah. Yeah. Who are we as Australians? In my work, in purpose, I talk a lot about, you can't connect to a meaningful why unless you know who you are. What is that narrative that drives you, that you live by? And that's what you've got with Clothing the Gaps. That's what has driven you as an organization to use fashion and your business as a vehicle for change. And I think that it's not just about business, it's about who we are as a nation and who we are when we are at our best. What that looks like is you can start to grasp it, and it's like, why are we pulling away from that? Let's all find a way to move towards that vision, because it's
Absolutely.
such an exciting one. And the more we lift all of us up, the more we prosper as a nation.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that, one of the really early things that I learned that was such an example of how understanding and respecting First Nations culture is not just good for First Nations people, it's actually benefits all of us, is the example of when I was, 18, 19, and I'd be having the privilege of working alongside community was helping out with the homework club at La Trobe. And I would always get really stumped when people would say, "Oh, who are you?" It's like, "I'm Sarah. I grew up in Donald." Like, "Yeah, but where's your family from?" It's like, "I don't know, Donald." They're like, "Yeah, no, but like, where else?" And like the reflection and the depth of understanding that I now have of my family story, of where I'm from and who I'm connected to in the world and how, and I can tell you the places in Ireland that my family came from, that I feel so grounded and connected to who I am in the world because of that. And I think that's the gift, is that so often people think that there is a fear that when we accept and celebrate somebody else, that it requires us to lose
A
something.
deficit.
Exactly. And that they go, "Whoa, it's all getting taken away from him." Like, actually, it's such a gift, and it deepens and stretches our own stories more. It's not taking anything away.
Oh, it really does. I've been going down the rabbit hole of my family history, the Australian side of my family history. There's also the English side, and there's so much multiracial background in my background. But in the Australian side, it's a Chinese Australian background.
Yeah.
And, I think one of my grandparents as a child was deported under the White Australia policy. And, like, digging through, it's really interesting, and you start to recognize why you think the way you do about things, which you weren't even aware of. So, yeah,
No,
it's
and it's not an
fascinating.
accident. It's systemic policy that has shaped this thinking strategically. And I think that's what we have to remember in it as well, is that this is the outcome of really racist and horrific actual structural policies. Yeah, as well.
Yeah.
But I think, the opportunity in the growth and the expansion of our thinking, Carolyn, is really exciting. And so it really is that, what does 10 years in the future look like, that's really driving me at the moment. And, I'm really excited about the Not a Date to Celebrate campaign. I'm so grateful to all of the brands and businesses and the 73 plus thousand, as we know, we're reporting this obviously earlier. And my hope and dream is that by the time we go live with this, that we're well over the 100,000 mark, and that, it's time for the government to step up and take some action here.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Sarah, I'd love you to share, if there's one message that you would love our listeners to take from this episode, what is it? And what is one meaningful action that they can take as well?
Yeah, I think my one message is a really big reminder, especially when the world feels messy and complicated, is that as individuals, we have agency. We get to choose what we do with our energy every day. What businesses we support through where we spend, what campaigns and causes we add our voice to. And I think in that, one thing that I would just love to ask all of your listeners to do today is to head over to our website, to jump onto that Not a Date to Celebrate campaign tab. Go and sign the petition. If you've got a brand, a business, or an organisation, and this is values aligned for you and you care about this cause, come on the journey with us. We'd love to add your logo. And so I just think there's a spot for everybody in this work, and the more the merrier.
Thank you so much. We'll include links in the show notes. Thank you so much. Thank you for allowing me to future dream with you.
Oh, it was so exciting. I love 10 years in the future Australia, according to you and I, Carolyn. I think it's brilliant. Let's get there.
And I encourage other people to think that way as well. Maybe, when you have conversations with others, maybe there's a place to frame that future dreaming. positive way to anchor the conversation,
Yeah.
as well as tackling the issue that actually we need to tackle in order to get there. But thank you so much for taking the time on today, Black Friday, when we're recording this. But I'm going to ask you to close out the show with any final words for our listeners.
Oh, look, at Clone the Guts, we say it's more than a tea, it's a conversation starter. And what you wear really does make a difference in the world. And it's an opportunity to share your values with people that you walk and work alongside every day. So just think, you're welcome to jump onto the website, grab a piece of merch that's the conversation that you're wanting to have in this moment of time, and be a part of the movement.
Before we close, I want to leave you with one simple reflection. As Sarah shared, change doesn't begin with having all the right words or getting everything perfect. It begins with paying attention, taking responsibility, and choosing where we place our energy. I know it's easy these days to feel disempowered by everything that's going on, but every one of us has agency. We have agency in the businesses we support, the conversations we're willing to have, and the causes we choose to stand alongside. If today's conversation resonated, I encourage you to learn more about the Not a Date to Celebrate campaign and consider how you or your organisation might take part in a way that feels authentic and aligned. As always, you'll find links in the show notes. Thank you for listening and for being part of a community that believes business can be a force for good when we choose to lead with both love and responsibility.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the For Love and Money podcast. If you'd like to take a deeper dive into the purpose movement, visit us at thecauseeffect.com.au. And remember, doing good is good for business. So if you're not doing good, then what are you doing?